Hi everyone, I'm Tiffany Benson, one part of Team Benson, and today we are going to talk about preserving. Not only preserving inside your kitchen, but for you small space gardeners out there too as well, also preserving something outside. Well, preserving two things outside. So let's get into this. So one thing I want to point out is that when I'm preserving a lot of different things, I preserve them in the way that I plan on using them later. So that way it makes it easier for me just to go to whatever it is that I'm using and just simply use it versus having to like unprocess it whatever way it was processed and then process it the way that I want to use it. So we are going to talk about 4 different ways that I preserve things. My 4 favorite ways to preserve things. I'll put that out there. The first thing I want to talk about is cilantro. Cilantro is one of my favorite herbs. We use it a lot in sauces. We use it on Taco Tuesday. We use it on all different types of things because we love cilantro. If you guys have been following along and watching my videos, you see that I had some huge cilantro bushes. Like they weren't even like plants, they were bushes at this point. And they were taking over my garden. One of the things I do love about cilantro is that you can plant it in between things and it really does keep down the pest on different brassicas. So my cabbage and my broccoli really were tamed by pests with the cilantro. It wasn't until the cilantro was getting ripped out that I started getting a few pests in there. But one of my favorite ways to preserve it is to mash it all up as much as I can and put it in ice trays like this. And I like to use these little silicone ice trays because they're easy to kind of break them out. And I love making salsa with cilantro that I've preserved. I put as little amount of water as I can. As you can see with this one, there's still some cilantro at the top. So as little amount of water that I can, but that'll provide a little bit of the water to the fresh salsa. So in Arizona, you can't grow cilantro at the same time as you grow tomatoes and jalapenos, and onions, which are 3 of the staples for making your salsa. But you can preserve your cilantro and then have all the other ones out in your garden. So then you can just throw it all in a blender, make a quick salsa. So one of the other ways I like preserving things are whole the way that they are. So basically taking it right out of the garden, washing it, drying it, so laying it flat to dry, putting it on a cookie sheet and putting it right in my deep freezer and letting it just freeze. One of the things I do with that, freezing it that way, is dill. It's one of my favorite ways to preserve dill because it keeps its shape and it also defrosts in the matter of seconds. Me just having this out for the past 2 minutes, it's starting to defrost. So then I can chop it up and put it in my pasta salads like you can see here. So the nice part about freezing your dill is that since I froze it separately, it comes out separately. So it's not all clumped up or anything like that. So all I do is just let it defrost and it takes about maybe 5 minutes. I just pulled it out and it's already starting to defrost a little bit. And then I can just chop it up and use it however I wanted to use it. So the end result is a yummy dill tuna pasta salad even after my dill plant is gone. Some of the other things I like to dry are parsley. I dry it the same way that I dry the dill, and in fact this makes the parsley really nice because I like to use parsley as a marinade. So I will blend it with some oil, some garlic, and maybe some pepper, like red peppers or something like that to give it a little spice, and then maybe even like a little bit of lemon juice and olive oil, and then I will use that to marinate my meats. And as you can see, it comes out in singles, and this one is already almost defrosting, so it doesn't take long to defrost, and it doesn't have any water to it, so it doesn't water down my marinade. So that is one of the other ways I like to use frozen herbs. The last thing I like to do frozen is whole lemons. I will take right here. So this is a whole lemon and it's frozen. A lot of times a recipe will call us for lemon zest. And if you're in the middle of like the winter and you have no lemon zest and you don't want to spend $6 a bag for like 3 lemons, you can just freeze lemons when lemons are abundant. And all you have to do is just take a grater and just grate your lemon, and there goes your lemon zest. So make sure you wash your lemons, because lemons can be really, really dirty growing on trees, especially here in Arizona. Wash your lemons first, and then once they're all cleaned up, just throw them in a big bag and freeze them. The third thing I like to do to preserve a lot of my herbs is using them in butters. I made these little dill butter balls, and they make life so much easier because whenever I'm cooking something like fish or seafood, any type of seafood, or sometimes even chicken, I can just take one of these out, and they're portioned to the size that I want them to be in order to just season my food with. I can use it for even soups too as well, or anything. And I make a lot of butters with a lot of my different herbs. I won't go into how I do this because I have a whole video about preserving my dill, which is what these are, dill butter balls. So I will post that link in the description so that you guys can watch that one too as well. So the fourth way I like preserving my herbs is good old-fashioned drying. This is some thyme that I have dried and I grounded. And then also over here, I have all of my teas. This one is lavender too as well, that I also grew and dried myself. So I cheat a little bit because I live in a small space garden. So I have a small space house. I live in a townhouse. And I don't have places, a lot of different places to hang a lot of my herbs without dust or anything like that getting onto them, and for them to be able to stay in a dark place without any type of lighting or other elements. So I use my dehydrator. This one is an inexpensive dehydrator that I got from Walmart, and actually I think I got it from Amazon. And it takes about maybe 45 minutes to an hour to dry out each herb. And then depending on what I want to do with the herb, how I want to use it, whether it's going to be in a tea, so I leave it kind of whole just so I can steep it, or if I'm going to be using it as seasoning and I want to grind it, then I do that with it afterwards. So here's a little video of how I preserved my thyme, which is a pain to get all those little stems off. Drying thyme can be a headache. As you can see, these little leaves, you want to get the leaves off the stems. So what I do is I put them all in my, I think this is called a pesto and muddle. I put them in there, and then I just grind them. So what that does is it separates the leaves from the stems. So then I can just go through and pick out the stems. And if there's leaves on it, I can just dust them off. So this makes it a lot easier to get those leaves off of the stems. And then I can also make a powder by just grounding it down even more. So if you live in a small space, there sometimes is a lot of different things that you'd have to preserve outside, not only just for your indoors, like your herbs and your fruits and different things like that, your vegetables, but there's also things about your garden you have to preserve. And these are things that a lot of people don't talk about. So we're gonna head outside and we're going to see what in my garden I need to preserve, especially during a time like this. So I grow an organic garden, meaning I don't put any type of pesticides or any type of chemical fertilizers on it as well. My main things that I use is compost, which compost is my main thing that I use, and then sometimes fish fertilizer too as well. So one of the things that people don't realize is that if something happens, or if you just need things in a hurry, sometimes you can't have them available to you in a small space. I really don't have room back here to have a big giant compost pile. So I purchase compost from the worm farm and I buy it in big bags, and I take care of that compost in the bag so that then I can use that whole bag throughout the growing season. So let me show you what I mean. So this is my bag of compost. Now, normally you would want to have a big giant compost pile, but I don't have any room to do that. So I like to make sure I'm preserving my compost by adding water to it. You never want your compost to be dry, and you never want it to be super moist too. You kind of want it to be in that middle. So to preserve my compost and make sure that it has all of the microorganisms still alive in it, then I add water to it probably about once a week. So if you allow your compost to dry out, you end up killing all of the microorganisms that are in there. And your soil needs those microorganisms. Your plant needs those microorganisms. So you want to make sure that you have your compost, because growing your garden with compost is one of the best ways to grow your garden, just because that's what your plant needs. But you want to make sure that it's alive. So you got to make sure that you take care of it, because if you don't have a space and you want to use the majority of your space for plants like me, then you want to make sure that your compost is still going to be healthy for all of your plants. So the next thing I'm going to preserve is probably mainly for us Arizonans, because we live in a desert and it gets to be like 120 degrees, but are worms. So right now my garden beds are full of worms. Even some of my pots, actually surprisingly, are full of worms. But I want to make sure that those worms do not die when it gets to be 120 degrees, because the chances of them doing that are pretty high. It's kind of hot out here. So one of the things I want to do is, you guys have seen my worm bin. If you haven't seen my worm compost bin, I will link that video down below too as well in the description, so that you guys can watch how I made it. But I'd like to keep that watered and fed. And then also making sure that my soil everywhere always stays moist, so that the worms aren't burning up in the Arizona heat. So let me show you just what I made. Attached to my bed, which those are my lovely Armenian cucumbers, there is a worm bin. And as you can see, the worm bin is starting to grow beans. I dropped whole beans in here, and yeah, they want to grow. But I keep fresh, just vegetables, any type of food scraps, or any type of just scraps out of the garden in here. And I make sure that it's well watered, and then I also have a lid that now goes over it to kind of keep it dark and moist and not so hot. So doing that will make it to where your worms aren't burning up, and they also have food when all of the garden is starting to dry up. So I feel like preserving the things that you can are some of the most important things you guys can do right now, because I'm not super afraid of a food shortage, but I don't want to be unprepared for a food shortage. And I suggest that you guys do the same thing too as well. If you have things in your garden, don't just let them, go bad and you rip up the whole plant. Preserve them while you can. So cut them as they're fresh, cut them as they're ready, and preserve those different things, so that then you can have more stuff in your freezer or in your refrigerator or on your drying rack, so that you're well prepared for you and your family. So until next time, grow yourself a garden, because even a small space can provide you with tons of food. Bye guys.